Liberty is never unalienable. It must be redeemed regularly with the blood of patriots, or it always vanishes. Of all the so-called natural human rights that have ever been invented, liberty is least likely to be cheap and is never free of cost. I have just finished Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein, and I have to admit I am disappointed. I had a lot of expectations going into this book. I expected this to be really controversial when I read it, because that's kind of the consensus that people have around this book. Robert A. Heinlein is a very famous science fiction author. He is one of the quintessential science fiction authors, but he's written a lot of stuff that is very polarizing, especially for the time and age he wrote it in. He was a former military guy, and he just kind of wrote whatever. He wrote all over the political spectrum, endorsing all sorts of crazy beliefs. And Starship Troopers is probably his most famous work. And, the way people talk about this is like, oh, it's such a controversial book. What the kind of government that Heinlein endorses is just crazy. Nobody could possibly think of this. So going into this, I had high expectations. I was hoping that this book would make me wrinkle my nose. It would make me say, it would hurt my bleeding heart, and that he would be endorsing some sort of really crazy, polarizing government, and it would really make me think, like as a reader. That's what I was hoping for going in this. And I also hoped, if I'm being honest, that this was going to be like a really cool, fun science fiction, bug shooting, military science fiction story, and it was none of that. It wasn't that controversial, and it also really wasn't that fun of a story. So I want to talk about the story aspect first, and then I'll talk about the controversial part that people seem to get hung up on, or used to get hung up on, when reading Starship Troopers. So the book is pretty boring, actually, with how cool this premise is. Set in the far future in a military society, Starship Troopers follows Juan Rico as he joins the mobile infantry, kind of by accident, and is shipped off to boot camp and then OCS, and then eventually to fight the bugs, the Tyranids or whatever, because they're attacking Terra and the human worlds that humanity has expanded across in the galaxy. That premise is really cool. If you've seen the movie, you know how cool that premise can be. But the book does not do like almost anything with the premise. The characters are really flat, super forgettable. The movie, again, I'm going to be contrasting with the movie because more people have seen the movie than the book, so I'm sorry. They're nothing alike. I just want to get that very out of the way. These are nothing alike. But, the movie has, these really fun, rompy characters that are totally memorable. Juan Rico's a really cool dude. He's got a bunch of side characters that are really cool, and you get attached to him. Does that happen in the book? Absolutely not. Juan Rico is boring. All the side characters are boring. There's nothing interesting about these characters whatsoever. There are, there's some interesting ideas between characters that are used, but these characters are kind of just prop pieces for what Heinlein is going to say about the future of this society. So the characters are total cardboard cutouts. Not a single one of them besides Juan Rico is even somewhat interesting, and even Rico himself is passable at best. He's fine. He's just fine. The world building should be really interesting because it's a militaristic, authoritarian future. So you kind of get this idea that it's maybe like dystopian. It's not. It's actually closer to a utopia than a dystopia. And while there's a lot of very interesting political commentary Heinlein does commit to, and I will get to that, there's just nothing unique about this future. If you've read literally any military science fiction book, you're going to be familiar with this. And obviously, this is where those ideas come from. So, this is not the fault of Heinlein, but he just doesn't do anything super amazing with the world here. The pacing. It's a pretty short book. It's 10 hours on audio. You can get it done in 2 days, easy. But the pacing is just, it's meager. Because most of this book takes place in boot camp. And then the other like 20% of this book is like one deployment, fighting bugs, and the rest is OCS and talking about what OCS is like. And if you're not familiar with OCS in the military, it's basically boot camp but with math. So again, it's not, there's just like the plot isn't super interesting. The characters aren't super interesting. The world building isn't super interesting. So where does that leave us? Well, with the themes. And this is the controversial part, right? Because people, when Heinlein wrote this, could not, I guess, imagine a future where the military was the number one priority. And now maybe this is my bias as a 21st century human. Maybe this is because of the times we live in that I don't find it controversial. Maybe if I could plug my brain back into, I think, the 1960s when this was written, I could understand why this was so crazy and controversial and people debated about this book. But this isn't that nuts. This is not some sort of incredibly fascist, endorsing, authoritarian, loving narrative. It's not. It just so happens that the noble experiment of democracy has failed in Starship Troopers' future, and the only people left over to pick up the pieces were military men and women who then decided that they would just run the government. And if you wanted to run the government or have a say in how the government was run, you had to go through the military. You had to join basic, you had to make it through, and that's how you get your citizenship. And yeah, I guess on some level, that's a controversial idea. It's not one I personally endorse. I believe everyone has unalienable rights. I believe that all people deserve a say in our democracy. Maybe that's controversial. But yeah, even if you like, this did not like offend me. This wasn't like that crazy controversial. It's a cool thought process of, you know, do we as humans, do we as people really, we take our rights for granted. We don't do anything with it. We don't, you know, we put our individual selves above those of the collective others. Duty no longer matters, and that's why our democracy is eroding. Those are really interesting ideas, but controversial? I don't think so. Maybe, again, maybe it's the time we live in. Maybe it's just the fact that I'm a bit more pragmatic about my belief system. But this isn't that nuts. This isn't endorsing some sort of crazy sexist society. Women are pilots in this future. Women serve in the armed forces. This is not some sort of crazy racist future. It seems like every color and creed is accepted here. From multiple planets, anyone can join the military. This is not some sort of crazy xenophobic future. All of humanity has united in this future, so it's not possible to be xenophobic. And again, like it's not even like homophobic or, you know, or it has any sort of commentary about, you know, class or gender. It's nothing. There's nothing there with that. There are simply the citizens who can't vote, but they seem to have every other right that you can possibly imagine that a person would want. And then there are the military men and women who have put themselves in line, therefore they can vote, and they can be citizens, and they can run the government. But, like, I don't know, like, to me, it's not that crazy controversial. Again, maybe it's just the time we live in. Maybe it's my own expectations getting in the way. But there was nothing here that, like, really made my eyebrows raise. I mean, this wasn't, like, anything where I was like, oh my, like, hold the horses, Heinlein. Whoa, I can't believe you went there. I don't know. Like, if you've read, like, anything even somewhat controversial by modern standards, you've read a more controversial book than Starship Troopers. I think unless you're totally innocent and totally just, like, plugged out of modern society, this will not shock you at all. Honestly, I would say that the movie does more to push a controversial narrative and in what it tries to do than this book does. And the movie is a parody of the book. So I just take that as you will. But yeah, I was majorly disappointed. I thought the themes were the best part, but everything else is very meh. There is interesting commentary here. I like that part. This isn't me just being like, oh, Heinlein's themes are complete garbage and you can just completely ignore them. No, 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 no. He's very good at the themes that he presents. The future that he presents is an interesting one. I just wish he did more with it, you know? I wish he went full goose. I wish he went full in. I wish he went full controversy, and he didn't. So I think, as much as I try not to, my own expectations did not match the actual reading experience. The plot was meh. The characters were there. They existed. The world building, I felt like you could do so much with this book and so much with these ideas, and it just didn't happen. The action is sparse, and when it happens, it's like basically cut over. So if you're looking for like a sci-fi future military book, this isn't it. If you're looking for some sort of really controversial science fiction book, I don't think that this is it. But, you know, if you like the idea of exploring a military future that is, at least by our modern standards or my standards, not really that crazy to think about, then maybe you'll like Starship Troopers better than I did. It's not a bad book by any means, but it is also not as good as I had hoped. Not even close. So I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Kind of a disappointment. Did not love it.